GHRT Rewinds are brought to you by Laughlin and Wolfington Realty. Mike and Nate and Harrison teaming up to help you sell your home faster and for top dollar. This is the George Hale, Rick Tyler Show. Harrison Kemp is with the Maine Libertarian Party. And before we get to the events that are coming up in Augusta at the State House, let's go back. The United States troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. From the Libertarian Party perspective here in the state of Maine, what's your reaction?
Well, our reaction is that the withdrawal was long overdue. It definitely was not done properly. You could tell it wasn't done properly because people lost their lives during the withdrawal. So I think that we have to take kind of a nuanced approach to this and say that something can be necessary and it can also get messed up in the process. And I think that's exactly what happened. That's pretty much the sentiment around the Libertarian Party, both with the members and the activists and everybody involved. So,
well, the military of the United States are deployed in most countries outside of the communist countries around the world. With we can't get an accurate number of how many are out there, but it ranges from 150 to 200,000 estimated. They do various things. We never know how many men and women are at sea, but there are a lot of military deployments around the world.
Yeah, there are. Right now, the United States has bases in 70 countries. That's about 37% of the world. So we have tons of troops all over the country or all over the world, and they're ready to engage in combat at pretty much a moment's notice. When I was in the Army, we were always ready. We had basically a 24-hour bag ready to go, and these folks who are deployed in various countries, Germany, Japan, etc., they're all ready to go. So that's what they're doing there. They're getting ready to back up other forces that are engaged in combat. You know, right now we're engaging in combat in roughly 6 countries. Kind of depending on how you think of combat operations, it's either 5 or 9. So 6 is kind of the best number for how many countries we're actually engaged in combat with. And 70 countries around the world. Yeah, you're absolutely right, George. We have troops everywhere.
Okay, now the reason George brings that up and the reason we have Harrison Kemp of the Maine Libertarian Party on the phone with us, and we mentioned the withdrawal from Afghanistan, is tomorrow's event, which we read, Harrison, as a call to bring U.S. soldiers home from all of those foreign countries back within our border. Is that right?
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah, that is absolutely right, Rick. We want to bring all of the U.S. troops home. We don't feel like we can actually say that we are protecting American interests and protecting American safety by having these bases all across the world. If we really want to keep America safe, what we need to do is bring our troops home and beef up our defensive forces. We need to make sure that we're not engaging in other countries' politics, which is kind of the reason that we got into this situation in the first place. It was blowback from what we were doing in the 80s and 90s in the Middle East. Osama bin Laden himself even said that they were attacking us because we've been occupying their lands, because we've been plundering their riches, dictating to their rulers, and humiliating their people, not because he hates apple pie and baseball. So we need to take a realistic look at what our foreign policy is causing, and then what those actions that our foreign policy is causing are bringing to us. So yes, we want to bring all of the troops home, starting with the troops who are in combat zones specifically. Those are number one priority. Bring them home. We should not be losing or spending any more American lives to defend our foreign policy interests in the Middle East.
Well, before I ask a few questions about the philosophy here, American troops do get in active combat. There's no question about that. But they also deploy as peacekeepers in some cases, military attachés. They serve in the embassies. They serve consulates. They secure Americans who are working in other countries. Now, there are classified missions of which we know nothing about and can't find out anything about, and shouldn't probably. But there are many reasons American troops are overseas.
Yeah, there are. For instance, when I was in the service, I went to Africa on a peacekeeping mission during the Ebola crisis. and helped build roads and make it so that the ambulances could get from the villages over to the hospitals. Those are important missions. I do think that there are better ways to do that than to have the U.S. send a bunch of people because, for instance, when I went on a peacekeeping mission, my unit sat around most of the time. We wasted a lot of American money, and it was just kind of a big waste. But we did have a good mission. So I think when we're talking about those types of peacekeeping missions, those are much different than combat missions. Peacekeeping missions, while they cost money, they don't cost lives. And they do contribute in positive ways to countries who can't help themselves. So, it needs to be a little bit of a nuanced view where, yes, we want to bring all the troops home, but that doesn't mean that when we have some group who is going out on a peacekeeping mission, that they're in the same group as the troops who are poised to do combat.
Harrison Kemp is with the Maine Libertarian Party, and you'll hear about this, we think, rally at the State House in Augusta, bringing more troops home following the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. I'm no employee of the State Department, and I don't know policy like you do, Harrison. I didn't wear a uniform like you and like George. But I sometimes wonder, the nuclear deterrent isn't going to keep people like Putin at bay. Something's got to be done. How do we maintain our global interests even as we bring everybody back within our borders?
Well, really, the best way to maintain our global interests is through trade. The more that we trade with certain companies, the more or countries, the more we interact with them, and the more that our cultures can meld. Everywhere that America has gone has become more Americanized. And it's because the American culture, the idea of capitalism, the idea that you can become something from nothing, that is really, really enlightening to a lot of people, no matter what country they're from. So I think the best way to deal with someone like Putin is to say, look, you can try to attack us, but we've got all of our troops home. We have invested in defensive forces rather than offensive forces. And if you were to invade, you wouldn't make it past California. So it wouldn't be in your best interest. That would put us in a much better situation than having a lot of our troops out of the country and then being attacked. And the more that we mess around in the Middle East, in Asia, and going up towards Russia, the more likely we are to incite a war. Because drone strikes, bombs, they don't really care who's around when they go off. So if there's some kind of Russian group that is out meeting with someone that we just bombed, inadvertently, we could have just started a war. So really the best thing for us to do is trade with these countries, develop diplomatic relations with them, and realize that Russia, it's not in their best interest to attack the United States. Not at this point, not at any point in the near future.
Starting in 1949 until now, about 30 countries, and I'm doing this from memory, about 28 European, about 2 North American countries, formed a group called NATO. NATO countries are a cooperative agreement. It constitutes a system of collective security, and the independent states agree to a mutual defense plan, basically, NATO. We concentrate a lot of talk, money, and effort into NATO. If the libertarian philosophy was complete and these troops were brought out of NATO, what would that do to Europe and the rest of the world that depend on the NATO forces?
Well, I think one of the issues with NATO is that everything's supposed to be even. Everyone's supposed to pitch in the same percentage of money, the same percentage of troops, and they don't. A lot of these European countries are not keeping up their end of the bargain, so it's turning into America supporting their militaries not only through direct funding and direct donations, but through the UN as well. So in the libertarian philosophy, if all libertarian policies were pretty much carried all the way through, it really would depend on which kind of libertarian you're talking to. There are so many different strains of libertarian. We're not a monolith. So but the general answer would be that no, we wouldn't be in something like NATO we would be in something that would have a lot less power. It would have a lot less control and a lot less authority. But there would be no reason that we couldn't have peace alliances with people, but having these types of alliances where we say, if you get attacked, we're coming to your aid all the time, guaranteed, we probably wouldn't have those because we would be a militarily isolationist area. We wouldn't be sending out troops everywhere. Now, we would be engaging in a lot of these different places through trade. So if somebody was going to be attacking one of our allies, we could just cut off trade with them. And that's going to do a lot more damage to their country. We've seen what's happening in Yemen with the Saudi blockade that's going on there, the U.S.-backed Saudi blockade, that's causing one of the greatest humanitarian crises in the world right now. You know, there are children dying every day from simple diseases because of this blockade. And so we've seen how just not allowing fuel and medicine into a country can really decimate them, especially when it's a less wealthy country. So I think that would be kind of the general answer for you.
Harrison, a couple of quick questions before we have to scoot. One is it going to be a complete wash financially? We bring these soldiers back. Maybe some of them are dismissed from service because we don't need them, unless maybe along the southwest border. But at the same time, then they're going to be looking for a job. But we're not going to be paying as much in taxes to keep the military functioning. Is it going to be a wash financially?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a wash. I think we're going to save a lot of money. So right now, our U.S. defense budget is over $7 billion. And that money right there, if we were to take that, and this isn't even a libertarian perspective, this is just a realistic perspective. If we were to take most of that money that we're going to save from the amount of troops that are leaving, from the amount of supplies we're going to be saving, if we were to take all of that money and direct it into the types of social services that everybody wants, that everybody's been hollering for. Now, I'm not saying they would work, but I'm saying that right there would fund a lot of homeless projects. That would fund a lot of food shelves. That would fund a lot of these types of community projects that a lot of folks desperately want and need, but we don't have the money for. And we don't have the money for it because we're engaging in all of these combat operations. And I would say, too, that a lot of these folks who are coming out of the military, they're going to be professionals. Like you don't stay in the military more than 3 or 4 years without being a professional, without being adaptive, without knowing how to go out into the world and make the best of your situation. Because every single day when you are in the service relies on you being able to do that. So I don't think that we should worry about these folks who are professionals, some of the best in their fields, coming home and finding work. Unfortunately, we fell 500,000 jobs short of our expected job numbers last month or last quarter. So I would say that there's plenty of room in the economy for these folks. And especially with, like you said, the tax money that we're going to be saving, that can provide some really, really important tax relief to families on the lower end of the economic spectrum who need help.
GHRT Rewinds, brought to you by your hometown real estate team, Laughlin and Wolfington Realty. Thinking about selling your home? Call 629-9211 and start packing.